As a SURGE member, you'll unlock access to resources that build confidence, motivation, and mental well-being to empower girls to stay in the game today and pave the way for their future success. Up your game with free professional development and curriculum resources for coaches and athletes. Foster community and connection with VIP access to girls' sporting events, coaching forums, giveaways, and workshops hosted by industry-leading partners. Make waves with exclusive SURGE branding packages, designs, and apparel. Recognize and celebrate with special awards like Team of the Season and Athlete of the Season to uplift and honor your female athletes. Unlock exclusive offers, including new product sneak peeks, promos, and member-only SURGE stores. Fresh content designed to empower female athletes will be added to the platform every month. So, together, we can help power girls forward.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's SURGE webinar, co-hosted with WeCOACH. We are joined today by mental game coach and author, Theresa Beeckman. First off, I want to thank you all for being here today. We know as coaches, parents, educators, and athletes, you're all extremely busy. Therefore, we really appreciate it. Today's content is going to be centered around strategies for coaching female athletes and bringing teams together. Be sure to stay engaged throughout the presentation for a chance to win some fun giveaway prizes. With that being said, I'll go ahead and pass things off to Vanessa Fuchs from WeCOACH. Thanks, Vanessa.
Yeah, thank you, Saxton, and hello, SURGE community. If you're in a location where it's conducive to do so, we would love for you to turn your cameras on and engage with us. We'd love to see your bright, smiling faces as we kick off a new academic year. Hopefully everyone had a chance to rest and recharge this past summer, and the new year is certainly underway, and we're really excited about today's opportunity to learn with our speaker. And before I do that, for those of you that may not be familiar, or we may not have had an opportunity to engage previously. My name is Vanessa Fuchs. My team and I lead WeCOACH, and we serve women coaches, all sports, all levels of sports, through year-round professional growth and leadership development programs. And we actually now offer over 13 different programs for our WeCOACH community. And we're really thrilled to be able to partner with SURGE and BSN Sports for today's webinar. Thank you for the opportunity to power girls and women forward. We wanted to mention just quickly, we've got our Youth and High School Women Coaches Academy coming up November 1st, and we would encourage you, if you haven't checked that out already, to please consider registering for that. Again, November 1st is our Youth and High School Women Coaches Academy, and Saxton mentioned it. Stay tuned. We'd love for this to be highly interactive with you. And we'd love to hear you drop questions. And so we do have some participation prizes that the BSN staff, my team, and also Tree will be awarding to those in the audience today. I've got the honor and privilege of introducing you to our very first member when we were the Alliance of Women Coaches, Theresa Beeckman. She was our very first member of WeCOACH, and also is a 2008 Women Coaches Academy Class 15 graduate, and possesses over 15 years of coaching experience at multiple levels of sport, including high school, club, and the collegiate level. Considering our topic today, pro tips for coaching female athletes so your team can win deep. Speaking of winning deep, it doesn't come as a surprise that Tree has developed quite a reputation for her technical expertise and player development skills. She's led her collegiate teams to multiple NCAA tournament appearances and secured several conference championships. She's also coached All-Americans and had athletes go on to play professionally after their collegiate career. She's also an author of Coaching Coaches. What she does today is coach coaches, and it's a guide that is aimed at enriching the skills of new and experienced coaches through effective mentorship and leadership strategies. Aligned with our SURGE values, she dedicates her time to promoting gender equality in sport and elevating the status and presence of women coaching across every sport. And it's my honor. We are, Tree, excited to learn with you today. And so let's see your best emojis and chat messages to give a warm Surge welcome to the founder and president of Tree Roots LLC, Theresa Tree Beeckman. Thanks for being with us today, Tree.
Oh my goodness, it's such an honor to be with everybody here. I am beyond grateful to be able to be here. So thanks for having me. I'm just gonna do this. I want to share my screen here, and then I'm gonna do this, and then I'm gonna undo that because I did it in the wrong order, because I need to see your smiling faces. It just makes it all so much better. So all right, we're gonna jump right into this. Hey, listen, everybody, I would love for y'all to jump in and unmute and interrupt me and do all those things, because I think it'll be more fun if we can make this interactive. But I'm going to try to cram a whole bunch of stuff into a really short period of time. And so I want to just get rolling right now. A little bit about me. That was a pretty comprehensive list of the coaching stuff. But before that, like when I was in high school, I just tried to play every single sport I could get my hands on, including boys football. And I was lucky enough to be able to play college softball at Saginaw Valley State University, which is a Division II. And I mean, I would eat dirt. I just loved it. But for whatever reason, while I was at Saginaw Valley, in fact, my freshman year, a JV volleyball job opened up at my high school rival. And the rest is history. I coached JV for a year. And then I started coaching the varsity team the very next year. And I just loved it. And truth be told, football is my favorite sport, which I'm not sure why. Like, I played it in high school, but I'm also a diehard Lions fan. I swear I thought they were going to win the Super Bowl, even when they went 0-16. So the fact that they're good now, you have no idea. This is just a really good time to be me, but I digress. Volleyball is a lot like football at a high level strategically. And so it really just kind of captured my heart pretty early on. And I coached, like, Vanessa said, I coached at all the levels. And it was somewhere around the time that I was at Central Michigan University that I remember having a conversation with one of my student athletes. I remember who I was talking to and where I was sitting. And I remember feeling a little bit like this. Hopefully this video plays. And Vanessa, if you'll give me a thumbs up if you can hear it. If not, it'll change the whole presentation. Oh, wait, too fast. Back up. Hold, please.
Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?
So if anybody has ever felt like that when they're talking to student athletes, that kind of is it was the prelim to sending me on the journey that I've been on for the last 9 years. And so now I get to live in the Venn diagram of generational understanding and connection, team culture. As Vanessa said, I wrote a book on team culture and leadership development and coach development. And I feel really lucky to be able to do that, because even before my time at Central Michigan was over, I remember thinking I just wanted to affect more than the 16 women on my team. And that young athlete that I was talking to is now a medical doctor and a professor, ironically, at Central Michigan. So she got through it. But at the time I was like, oh boy, we're in for a world of hurt. And I feel like a lot of coaches feel like that. In fact, I mean, I saw this comic and I just kind of go back to it all the time, because it sort of feels a little bit like this sometimes. Or I don't know if any of you have experienced this, but I know that I've literally done similar things to what this coach is doing. Yeah, but that I've had many of email and text conversations that looked a little bit like that. So today we're going to dive into, the topic of coaching female athletes. And I'll tell you this, people talk to me all the time about this because I get now I played both on a boys team and girls teams, several boys teams and girls teams when I was growing up. And I remember feeling a difference, and I work with teams, regardless of gender. And so I get to see in real time what that's like. And this is what I'm going to just give you the spoiler alert right now. I think that there are differences, but I don't think that they're fundamental differences. I think that girls and boys, women and men have shame triggers that affects the way that they sort of experience each other when it comes to team dynamics. And so I think that boys need relationships to thrive as much as girls do. I just don't think that they're always aware of it. And so I will tell you, I'm kind of going to present this with a slant towards coaching female athletes, because I think it's important, especially for men who aren't necessarily socialized in the same way. I think it's important for men to understand. I actually work with male teams that I feel a bigger need and a bigger thirst for relationships because they can sometimes be even more isolated. So that's a whole semester's worth of stuff that I just crammed into a couple of sentences there. But we're just going to forge ahead, and I want you to jump in. And if you're like this sounds like crap, please challenge me, please disagree. I think those are the best conversations. I'm going to start here though. Sometimes when I'm working with coaches, I hear people say, well, I'm just not going to do that culture stuff. And I got to be really clear when I'm talking about all of these things, like culture is ubiquitous. It is within every team. It doesn't matter if we're talking about a McDonald's or the Lions or your family. It doesn't matter. Culture exists over time. I think that with teams, it's a complex culture because you're trying to come together to achieve a common goal. Whereas like say a school classroom is maybe a simple culture where you're coming together, a culture is going to form because at the end of the day, it's just environment over time, right? So when we're talking about culture, it's important that we know what we're like, how to simply identify it. It's just environment over time. I think that's the wrong question, figuring out what culture is. What I've done, and you're going to see it in a little bit, is I've tried to create a model that allows people, coaches, leaders, really any leader, even the head of a family, to get their hands on not what culture is, but of what the components are that affect it the most. And I think there are 5 main components to it. And here's the deal. There's one through line that touches every single component that goes into your culture, and that's trust. And I'm going to bring in put my generational hat on for a second. This is the lowest trusting generation of all time by a lot, by like 20 points on a Pew Research scale. So if you take I'm Gen X, and then there was the millennial generation, and now we're at the tail end of Gen Z. From the millennials to Gen Z, there was a 20-point difference drop in trust. That's like, it should lead the nightly news. It's usually 4 or 5 points from generation to generation. So basically on this scale that I'm referring to, there were 8 trust categories. 49% of Generation Z put themselves in the lowest possible trust category. That's very, very alarming. And trust is the one thing that touches every part of your team's culture. And so that's why it just sort of sometimes when you're trying to coach this generation, it can feel a little bit like this.
And close your eyes and just fall down, okay? Don't worry.
Okay, then Lauren's going to catch you.
Close your eyes. Okay.
Okay, it's called the trust fall. Okay, trust fall. Ready, set, go.
For me, that's the best representation for trust I have ever come across. So I just keep playing it until I find a better one. That's what, when I'm thinking of building trust with these student athletes that you're coaching right now, that's what I feel like it's like. And here's the thing. I think that so often our response to that, instead of curiosity and understanding, and this is related to our own self-leadership, I think that so often our response to that frustration in creating trust ends up looking like this.
I call it your life plan.
Life plan?
Life plan. We're not leaving anything to chance. Everything's here, oriented top to bottom, left to right. Let's take a closer look. The minute of the hour of the day of the week of the month of the year of your life. Everything. Got it? It's even got a chart for all your birthday gifts, like your 9th birthday coming up. Microscope, perfect for the Worth Academy biology curriculum. It's already wrapped.
Wow.
Yes, wow. But for now, all your attention should be focused here. The first day of your new school. You've got 53 days of prep time, which doesn't sound like much until you break it into hours, 1,272, or minutes, 76,320. Only then do you realize how much can be accomplished. You will use those minutes, hours, and days according to this. Because let's face it, you're gonna be all alone out there. All alone. So, we can't afford any more mistakes like the interview.
Right.
You are going to make a wonderful grown-up.
Thank you, Mom.
I don't know if you caught it. I certainly do every time I watch it, the fear in that mother's eyes when they zoom in on her. And I think that it's important to note what we're all going through as leaders right now and trying to lead this generation that's low trusting and lonely is and on the tail end of something like COVID. Even if COVID went really well for you or really well for all of your athletes, at the very least, it was uncertain. And in the face of uncertainty, we get super certain. In the face of uncertainty, we get tribal, right? So a lot of the control that we're feeling from parents or our urge after you lose a big game, I know I'm guilty of this. I'm going to be on the bus on the way home and I'm going to plan the most intense practice ever, right? Because we want to claim some control back when we feel out of control. And it's important to know and kind of structure or hang this whole thing around that idea that fear drives a lot. And as a society, we, especially in these next 60 to 70 days, we're all experiencing a lot of uncertainty, a lot of upheaval, and that fear sometimes causes us to seek to control. Leadership and control are not the same. And so, and this generation is not necessarily responsive to it, and it's making them hopeless. Because, I mean, think about it. If you don't feel like you have control over your life, can you see how that might be hopeless? And so I come at all of this from the angle of it's better to get this, everything we're doing to be our have to, or our get to, and not our have to. And so I'm going to go into the topic that we're talking about, but as we already, kind of established, I played football. So I played on a boys team in high school, and I understand the difference, and I work with boys teams all the time. So I understand that there is definitely a difference. I think that Ted Lasso and that show put it exactly right when they said this.
You and Roy got your own history. Y'all got to get together and woman up.
Think you mean man up, mate?
No, y'all been manning up for a while now. Look where that's got you.
And isn't that the truth, right? So as I want to dive into this particular topic, it's important that I kind of give you just a look at the model that I created. But in doing so, I want to just talk about why it's a plug. So the model is this 3-prong plug, and this is your culture. This is my late brother, Brent. I just passed the 5-year anniversary of his death. He was an electrician. But in addition to him being an electrician, this model will really help you understand team culture and really plug your team in, so that the goal is to combine your team so that it can become better than the sum of the parts. And actually, when you're coaching female teams, you have a huge advantage because evolutionally, like I just made that word up, by the way, we are kind of designed and socialized to collaborate. We're like a web, right? Where guys are more linear, they're more hierarchical. And so again, I say that I think everybody needs a relationship. And I think that the loneliness level is at an epidemic proportion right now. But for girls in particular, their webs actually can go against them.
Hope so.
Right now. Yeah, go ahead.
She shut the door. Oh, did she just shut the door back?
Okay. I think that was an accident. Darn it. I lost my train. No, I'm just kidding. I think that web structure and the way that women are sort of socialized to collaborate can sometimes go against them. Right now, when I'm working with teams, and this includes Power 4 teams, y'all. So this is what I would say to you. High school coaches tell me all the time, well, they don't have to worry about this in college. Yeah, they do. This is the same conversation. Playing time is absolutely never a reward. The rewards are many on your team. For sure, they're many, but playing time is not one of them. Playing time is just a absolute, like the result of your team coming together and us trying to find the right 6 people or the right 12 people or whatever you're doing, the right people to put in the pool, on the ice, or on the court. That's it. And for whatever reason, for a really long time, we started to kind of talk about playing time as a reward. And so what happens, especially with female teams, is it's really hard when we're trying to make sure that we're not letting our parents down, or we're associating our worth with playing time, or we're thinking of it in terms of, well, I work hard and I show up every day, so I should get to play. That we have to stop that, because here's the thing with girls, especially, and women, it's really, really hard to put teammates before friends. But we do nothing. We help them not at all in their future if we placate and we avoid those conversations. And so before I dive into this, actually, I want to go back, and I sort of skipped over this. I think this is the best example that I can give you for this. This is my favorite coaching picture of all time. It's 2011. It's the one and only MAC tournament championship that Central Michigan won in volleyball. And as you can see, I was a setter trainer. And you can see on the right-hand side there, my sophomore setter, Kelly Maxwell, is hugging me, but that's not why it's my favorite picture. On the other side is a senior. Her name is Kat Ludwig. She's married now, so it's not her married name, but at the time, and Kelly's married too, so they have different names now. But Kat, you can see, has joy like crazy on her face, and she has her warm-up jacket on. She has her warm-up jacket on because she didn't play at all. She was a senior that year. She was the starter in the previous year. That was my first year at Central Michigan. So I was brought in to train the setters, and Kelly just really, like, I don't know, whatever it was, she just absolutely took off. And it was really hard for Kat. And so this kind of takes me back to a really big point that I want to make in this entire webinar. The key to coaching female athletes really, really successfully is we have got to be brave and have a lot of really hard conversations. We think that 2 things. We try to lead through control too often, and we think that we can be kind to them and save their feelings by not being honest with them and not revisiting those hard conversations over and over and over again. I'm going to tell you, the amount of times that the 3 of us had a conversation about Kelly beating Kat out for the starting job was many, 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 many. And so fast forward to about 2/3 of the way through the season, I walk into the arena and the setters were in there training ahead of time. And I remember they were kind of whispering as I walked up, and they were like, hey, I'm like, what's up? And they were like, and by then we had gotten through a lot, and there were a lot of tears, and it was extremely uncomfortable. And Kat had to navigate her parents' disappointment. These are all things that you absolutely cannot sweep under the rug as coaches with female athletes, and you can't play them against each other, because the web, for female athletes, the web isn't designed to rise up when somebody else rises up. Like, think back to caveman days. If men went out and did the hunting and the gathering and the whatever, and women were back at the wigwam or the cave or whatever, right? And they had all these jobs that they had to do. So they had to work together. Somebody had to watch all the children. Somebody had to go pick the berries. Somebody had to, I don't know, restring the roof, whatever. They did all the things. Meanwhile, the men were out and they're doing their little hierarchy thing. And here's the deal. If Tom wanted to go faster and he was the leader, he had to get everybody else to go faster. But if John didn't want to, or if he wanted to go a different direction, they had to confront each other. John broke Tom's leg and then John rose up. That's just how it went. This is evolutionary, right? I'm obviously making it really quick. But meanwhile, back at the wigwam, if Sally ticked off Betty, Betty can't do anything to Sally because she might be the one watching the kids. So what did she do is she went to all these other people and she worked to get her exiled. And Meanwhile, also, if somebody back at the wigwam, if one of the women rose up above the web, they don't go up and rise up with her like the men. If John wanted to go faster, the men have to go faster or they're all going to die. Back at the wigwam, they all had to, they didn't rise up. They go and they grab her down. And essentially that's what's happening on female teams all the time. So if you aren't confronting issues like playing time, issues like this person ticked me off, or this person's being a mean girl, if you're not confronting them directly, you will absolutely have a very, very toxic environment. The collaboration and the socialization for female athletes is so entwined that if you're not confronting it directly, I promise you it will toxify. You could accidentally have good culture, but you absolutely 100% will be better off if you face up to these things. And so what I do with teams, the number one thing that I do with teams, hold on, I got to finish this story. I'm all over the place. This is the first person that Kelly congratulated after the tournament championship. You see the joy on their faces? And it's exactly, we would not have been there. We would not have been there if Kat hadn't gotten Kelly through it. And how we got them there and how we got to this moment where there was utter joy was through direct confrontation. I'm going to stop right now because I'm like all over the place. And I want to ask you, because I know some people are hearing me talk and they're thinking, yeah, my players can't handle that. I've tried to have direct conversations and then their parents are like all over the place or whatever. So what I want to do is I actually want to stop and I want to get some brave soul either in the chat box or to unmute. And I want you to tell me about a time that you tried to have a direct conversation with your student athletes and they didn't know how to take that feedback or their parents jumped in. Go. I've actually, Crystal, that's a great question. She says, how about co-ed teams? I coach boys and girls cross country together. Do you have the ability to unmute? I want to have a conversation real quick about this.
Sure. What's up?
Okay. So tell me the biggest difference that you notice in coaching both of them when it comes to being direct.
Well, honestly, like I've always related to boys, like growing up playing sports. I always got the boys a lot more than I got the girls. And if I find that as a coach too, like I really relate to like the direct conversation and, but it seems like I'm not connecting with my girls where I can connect with the boys. And I don't know exactly why that is, but I think you're hitting it somewhere.
Yep. Nope. That's awesome. Thank you for expanding. Okay. This is not the first time I've heard this. And by the way, I grew up with all boys too. Like I completely relate. And I was just actually up doing a thing with boys and girls directly and with a high school, like a full freshman class thing just last night. And this is what I'll tell you. So Lori Glass is the person who kind of connected me. Her daughter was Alicia Glass, who played for our Olympic team. And she's a Hall of Fame coach herself. And she works at the school district. And there was a young man while I was presenting who was really just disruptive. And she was like, yeah, he's got a lot going on or whatever. And I was like, cool. I do this all the time, right? So I'm going to answer this by saying this. When we don't feel seen, we feel judged. And Lori struggles with this. She's been coaching forever and she's got, I don't know, 1,000 wins and over 1,000 wins. She's fantastic. And we talked about it afterwards. And she said, I just don't understand. Like, and this kid changed in the middle of this hour. And I never once reprimanded him. I never once judged him. I just kept pointing out that when we're doing things like that to make it less safe for other people, it's our own armor. Right. And he somewhere along the line changed. And she was like, how did you do that? And this is the end of like, to get to my point here. This is a generation of student athletes, male or female, that we literally can't look at them. None of us. And I study them and I talk to them and I'm nobody to them. So they tell me a lot of truth. None of us can look at this generation and say, I know exactly what you're going through. And I think understanding that is a really big first step to being able to coach generations that we don't understand. And I'll say more. Brene Brown, if you don't know her stuff, I'm sure many of you do, but if you don't, she's really fantastic. And her stuff is really based on research and it's fantastic, like for coaching. And I do a lot of her stuff in my work because I want to make it accessible to coaches. She points out that when we're thinking about empathy, so often we think about it like, I'm going to put myself in your shoes. But I can't possibly know what it's like to sit and catch up at lunch and have that follow me around potentially for a month. I can't possibly imagine what it was like to miss 3 years of school because of COVID. I can't imagine what it's like to have on my tail 100% of the time potential for going viral for a negative thing. I can't even imagine that. And so when we hear how anxious they are, when we hear about the mental health struggles that they have, for girls, when we see them shying away from having conflict without trying to see it from their eyes, we lose the ability to lead them. As soon as somebody tells you what they're going through and we doubt it, we've put up a wall, we've put up a blocker. And so for me, and I don't know your situation, but I would imagine that it's easier for you to relate to your boys rather than your girls, because you see yourself a little bit in your girls and you're like, why in the world? I wasn't like that. This is a very, very different world. And here's the number one piece of feedback that I get when I'm working with student athletes. We have the ability to talk with her about these things without feeling judged. When we don't feel seen, and this is true for you and me too, when we don't feel seen, we feel judged. And so I want you to understand that we all have our own perspective on, and this is good for us in society, by the way, right now, this would help everybody. I have my glasses on. I'm seeing the world through my perspective. I have my story. I have my trigger. I have my history. I have all of those things. I cannot take them off. So instead of trying to put myself in their shoes and being like exasperated because they, I just talking to a Power 4 coach this morning, and one of her athletes, called one of her teammates and said that she was nervous because all these people were out here and they wanted to talk. And she was like, just come inside. Like, what is wrong with you? Right. But they don't have the repetitions to have like the know-all to do those things. And so, but my biggest point is if you're doubting them, if you're not believing them, if you're judging them at all, if you're trying to experience what they're going through your prism, you will lose the right to be able to lead them. And girls are socialized to pick up on that. And so I think in some aspects, it's even trickier. And let me just say one more thing to this. I think that both boys and girls, I think that are lonelier than ever for sure. But I think that because girls are sort of meant to be social, they're socialized to be more interconnected. And they're lonelier than ever. We can tell them all day long to hold each other accountable or to have conflict. But if we don't tool them up and then give them actual repetitions to have healthy conflict, you can just keep asking and asking and asking. It's not going to happen. They have a little bit of belonging with their team. There's no way they're going to put that at risk to have an uncomfortable conversation. And let me just kind of add on to this. We have to dispel the myth that good culture is nice culture, is comfortable culture. I hear all the time from teams, yeah, we're a family. No, you're not. Who are you rudest to? Ask your team that. If they say they want to be a family, and that can be your thing, that's fine. But let's be a real family. Families, we're rudest to our siblings, right? Why? Because they're our siblings. They're not going anywhere. We stay surface level with our teams because we're afraid. So I go back to that opening video. So much of what we're experiencing right now with our student athletes is born out of fear, our fear and their fear combined. I have so much more that I could say. That was such a good point. So I don't even know if I answered your question, but did I help you at all on that?
I think I have some things to think about. It's a good
Follow
start.
up with me after. I'm happy to have this conversation for forever. Like a back and forth on this would be amazing. And good job on the award you got there. One of the things that taint girls' women's sports is the desire for girls to maintain femininity, and the stereotypes that are placed on girls play sports. It's baffling. To me, there's no gender per se when it comes to being an athlete. And yeah, that's fair. I hear you. However, socially, especially, you have to remember in adolescence, like we were narcissists too. Like we just were. So I don't completely disagree, but here's my thing. This will take me back to the thing because I just went on a huge tangent. this is what I will say. I want to help people plug in their teams. And so I want you to think of your culture as we're trying to plug all of the energy of the coaches, of the players, all the people that are around your team. They make up the electricity that powers your team. And what I'm trying to help coaches do is build a conduit that can take plug into all of that energy, combine it so that everybody can become better than the sum of the parts, so you can power the team to greatness. So that 5 times 50 equals a billion, right? And so the first step in that is connection between the people. It's trust, it's conflict, it's the health of your conflict, it's emotional agility, it's all of those things, right? That has to be fired up. And that, by the way, in electricity, like with a plug, like a real plug, that's the one that'll shock you. Same is true for your team, right? And so the neutral prong is how we connect those people then to the purpose, mission, and vision, what you're trying to do. Like if you have a really connected team, but they're not connected to the purpose, you just got a great sewing circle at that point, right? And so we want to try to fire up those 2 prongs first, because that grounding prong, the thing that grounds you, that's how you do what you do on and off the court, right? And so often that by the way, the behaviors, like we show up 10 minutes early, we don't leave trash on the bus, those things. Yeah, those things, there's a lot of language, and they're not always, but they're typically more black and white. And so most of us go to behaviors first. But what I'm saying with this is if we can connect our people, if we can get them to connect in a deeper way, and by the way, the doorway to deeper connection for all of us is through conflict, not shouting at everybody. I think we get accountability wrong. Accountability isn't yelling at your teammate. Accountability is setting a really, really clear boundary and then getting everybody to hold themselves and each other up to that boundary or within that boundary. That's accountability. It's not, but if you ask student athletes, they think it's yelling at, I got to yell at my teammate. That's not accountability, right? So the doorway to deeper relationship is through conflict, but they're so lonely, they're afraid to have the conflict. And so they stay surface level, and we can never reach our potential. But if you can fire up these 2 hot prongs, when your players get to a stop sign and they're going to make a choice to go right and go to the party and get, do bad things and stay up too late, or take a left and go get some water, because they feel such a connection to their teammates and their coaches, and because they're so connected to what y'all are trying to do, they'll make the better decision with their own agency. That's a heck of a lot more powerful than they're having to do it. I want to make it their get to, and I want to inspire them to be their very best with their own agency, rather than say this is their get to. And I know it sounds like I live in Disney World, but I've seen this happen over and over and over again. Western Michigan University's volleyball team was one of the first teams that I started kind of experimenting with. I went from Central to Western. I was not an on-court coach. I was basically doing this, and I was kind of figuring out this model with them. Last year, they were 31-3 and went to the second round of the NCAA tournament. And just on Sunday, they beat number 24 or 25 Marquette in 4, like it was nothing. And they're a MAC school, right? And they did it through this kind of culture. Their players are absolutely connected to each other and what they're trying to do. And so there's not a lot of have to in their program. So all of it is surrounded by the feedback loop. And here's the thing. I think in athletics, I think in probably the corporate world too, I do some corporate work. Feedback usually goes in one direction, top down, senior to freshman, coach to player. But the line between cult and culture is razor thin. And if your culture isn't one where you all get to challenge the ideas and you get to challenge the leaders, you got a cult, and you're going to stagnate. It's not about, I swear I'm not getting political. This is just team dynamics. If you stagnate, if you're not getting, like, you all have blind spots, whether you think so or not, right? They're called blind spots for a reason. If you're not teaching your players to give you feedback and taking it in a way that keeps asking for more, if your feedback is only going in one direction, boy, your program is just not going to be as good as it can be. It might be good for a year or two, but it's always going to dip, and your players are always going to hold back. Where do we have the most growth in athletics? But on the edge of our ability. If your players cannot communicate what they're really thinking, if they can't show up and be really like fully who they are, you absolutely can't reach your potential. The more time your team can spend on the edge of its ability, the better you will get, period. Whether we're talking about an individual athlete or your team's culture. So that feedback loop, by the way, that's where everybody gets fired. I work with coaches all the time, and feedback is in, and I'm not talking about anonymous surveys that your AD gives at the end of the season. I'm not a fan, right? Because I think that just perpetuates lack of trust. I'm talking about day-to-day informal feedback where you're showing and modeling that you know how to accept feedback when you did wrong, and that you're modeling holding yourself accountable and showing up and apologizing when you did wrong. And I know I'm a Gen Xer. I know a lot of us didn't have that modeled for us, but let's break that cycle. If you want to be at your very best, I'm telling you, the feedback loop is like where it goes. And then we have habits in all of those things. The better your habits are, the faster that signal will travel. The faster that signal will travel, the better your team will be. I am so far out of time, but I just want to do this. I gave you a whole bunch of tools. Mostly I just kind of talked about a lot of stuff. We're going to have a Q&A here. I have a whole like thing on this. I have a whole like presentation that keeps going. I just got it on I have the mind of a drunk monkey sometimes. So sorry about that. I'm willing, if you reach out, I'm absolutely willing to do. In fact, I can do this on the behalf of WeCOACH and Surge. I'm absolutely happy to like record one, and then you guys can send the whole like presentation. I can get through all the slides. But I do want to end with a story for your hearts as much as anything before we go into our Q&A. And it's about this guy. So I'm from Michigan. As you can see, I got the mitten up behind me. And so is he. Everybody thinks of him as being from Ohio, but he's actually from Port Huron, Michigan. And then they moved to Ohio when he was young. One day he got sent home from school and he had a note pinned to his shirt, and he gets home and his mom was like, Tommy, what is that? I don't know if she called him Tommy, but isn't that fun to imagine? Like Tom, I don't know. It's Thomas Edison, whatever. And he's like, I don't know, Mom, it's for you. And so she unpins it and you know, she takes it off and she starts reading it and she starts bawling. And he was concerned. He was like, Mom, what's going on? And so she read the note, and the note said, your son is a genius. This school's too small for him and doesn't have enough good teachers to train him. Please teach him yourself. And so she did. He was homeschooled. True story. And so like whatever he was curious about, like she exposed him or like, you know, kind of got him anything she could so he could investigate that. And she just exposed him to all these things, all the while just like feeding him with the narrative. You're a genius. You're a genius. You're a genius. And so he went on to do some great things, including inventing the light bulb with a team and other things. And it was many years later, after his mom had passed on, he found this box of some of her old stuff. And in that box, he saw that note. It still had the same pin in it that he had in his shirt all those years ago. And just for like old time's sake, he missed his mom. And so he took it out and he opened it up and he read it. Only it was his turn to start bawling, because what that note had actually said all those years ago was this: your son is addled, which meant mentally ill or deficient at the time. We won't let him come to school anymore. We don't have the teachers to handle him. You'll have to teach him yourself. Now, I know that this generation can be frustrating. And I know that sometimes it feels like, you know, especially with female teams, like there's girl drama and whatever. I would just implore you to remember this. We bring out the best in people when we believe in the best about people. Somewhere on one of your teams is the cure for cancer. Somewhere on one of your teams is the cure for a lot of the social stuff that we just need solutions to. They're really intellectually advanced. They just haven't had as many social repetitions. So I'll just end it by saying, you know, going into the Q&A, like believing in them is probably the most important paradigm shift that I help bring to teams and bring to their coaches. And when we don't feel seen, we definitely feel judged, and they already feel pretty judged because they spend a large portion of their time judging themselves against a perfection filter on social media. So be a source of hope for them, be a source of belief for them. Make sure that they have the narrative that they are pretty fantastic. They just don't have the skills. So let's find a way to give them the skills, especially for girls, skills related to conflict. So with that, I'm going to leave it. There's my email address. I'm sure that they're going to have ways to get in touch with me. And again, I really am sincere. I will just, without, you know, anything, I'll go ahead and record that expansion of the presentation so that we can get to some more tools that I had planned. Hey everybody. So I wanted to follow up with a video that kind of takes us through some more of the actual presentation that I was hoping to get to, because I feel like there was a really key point that I missed. And so I'll keep this short and sweet. Um, you know, I already broke down the plug model in the other recording, and this is it in its whole totality. And the thing that I will tell you, while trust is a through line to great culture, it touches literally every single aspect. And you're coaching the lowest trusting generation of all time, and it's the lowest trusting by a lot, like 20 points on the latest Pew Research study. Creating safety within your team could not possibly be more important if you're trying to get your team to be able to have the conflict without them fearing complete loss of their connection and belonging. And so with that, I would just say this. How do I talk about this? So psychological safety is the term, right? And so often when we're talking about psychological safety, I hear coaches say like, oh, I got to lower my standards. It's actually quite the opposite. When I'm working with college teams, and I work with middle school through professional, honestly. So there's not that many differences. I just can't say that enough. But when I'm working with college teams, obviously they have transfer portal and NIL and all those things. But high school coaches and club coaches obviously have to worry about their players leaving just as much. And so I will say this. When we start to lower our standards to try to keep our teams, that's our first step to losing the whole bit of progress, any progress that we made. Psychological safety is actually an indication that you can push your players to a higher level. So when I'm talking about psychological safety, I'm not saying lower your standards. I'm saying if your team feels psychologically safe to show up and be exactly who they are, to even bring hard truths and criticisms to you as a coach, if you're creating that kind of culture, you can actually ask for more. And Western Michigan is the key example. Like this, they've redone their locker rooms since this, but when we first started to renovate their culture, this, how we treat each other is everything, was like 3 feet tall on the wall. And every time we use this phrase, we clarified that didn't mean that we were going to be kumbaya. It meant, no, we're going to save each other from bad decisions. We're going to lift each other up. We're going to have hard conversations. If we're really going to be a family, we're going to be a real family, a dysfunctional family, a family that confronts each other. And so they set about to make it feel safe to have failure and make it feel safe and necessary to have hard conversation. In creating a safe environment, it's not easy, but it's fundamental to elite culture. It was actually Daniel Coyle. He's the author of the book, The Culture Code. And I reference his book a lot in the book that I wrote about culture. And in that, I remember I wrote my book and I was reading this list in his book during the first parts of the pandemic in 2020. And I remember thinking, oh boy, I am going to be real busy after that. And it was because this was the actual list and he wrote this book way before the pandemic. This was the list. He said that when he traveled and he visited the Navy SEALs, Pixar Animation, it wasn't just athletic teams, it was elite cultures of any kind. He noticed that the best cultures, the most elite cultures, sent signals of safety. And they were things like this. Physical touch, profuse amounts of eye contact, close physical proximity, literally things that we do in teams to send these little signals of safety. So in addition to all the things that I said on the call, I think it's important to underlie the idea that we have to work really hard to create safety within our environment. That safety is the doorway to higher performance, because again, I want to reiterate that teams and individuals grow the most when we're on the edge of our ability. And so we have to make sure that our athletes and our coaches feel like they will be caught if they happen to tip over the edge, because we want them to ride the edge of their ability as much as possible. That is the absolute elixir to growth. And some of how you do that is making sure that you're getting empathy right. I said this over and over again on the call, but when we don't feel seen, we absolutely feel judged. And that's important because with this generation, none of us can look at them, even if you're an older Gen Z, every time a communication app changes from Snapchat to TikTok or whatever, every time a social media channel changes, it absolutely changes a big portion of the social references. And there's little like micro generations in there. So even if you're within the Gen Z generation, it doesn't mean that you know exactly what they're going through. And I would say we all have our own story, our own experiences. And so because we can't say, I know exactly what you're going through, it's just really important to grab onto a different definition for empathy, where I'm going to believe what you're telling me and I'm going to try to relate to how that must feel, but I'm going to believe you. And so that's a huge part of creating a psychologically safe space. The other thing I will say is when it comes to trust, there's no better tool than Brene Brown and braving. Now there's a video, if you go to YouTube and look it up, Brene Brown, braving, there's a 20-minute video. I usually show teams about a 6-7 minute clip that's in the middle where she breaks these down. But basically, based on her research, her data, these are the 7 behaviors that contribute to or detract from trust the most. And I use this with teams all the time. In fact, I'll have, copies of this on my desk. And I had like a couple of players. I remember once when I was working with Western, 2 of the older players came to me and they were like, hey, we're struggling with this player. And she was in an important position. And she said, or I pulled out these worksheets and I had them rank, where they were with her in each of these things, 1 through 7. It was a forced rank. They couldn't have a tie. So 7 was the highest, 1 was the least. And I did 1 too. We all came back together and we saw some patterns. And then now they had the language to be able to go and talk to her about what they were, where they were struggling with her and trusting her. The other tool I gave, and this is also a Brene Brown thing, is she talks about meetings after the meeting. And what is that? It's just where, you have a meeting and you hold back, or you give the dirty yes and you say, yeah, that sounds good, coach. And then you walk away, you're like, yeah, that's not going to happen, right? The dirty yes. And you go and you find your friends and then you talk crap about the meeting. And when I'm working with teams, I just ask them, would our team be better if we didn't have those? And always they're like, yep. And so we talk about like the language to shut that down. Like you can say, if somebody comes up to you and they start talking about the meeting in a negative way, or they start saying things that they disagreed with, you could stop them right there. Like, listen, I hear you, but if you didn't say it in the meeting, you don't get to say it after the meeting. So do we need to revisit this? Okay. Because if not, then we're not going to talk about it here. That's unproductive and it fractures our team. And then the other one I said on the call is clear is kind, unclear is unkind. Like, I think that our student athletes are dying for braver leaders. I think Brene is dead on. I also know that there's cancel culture. I also know that parents are so often stepping out of their lanes. So I think that you have to be careful in how you do it. And you want to seek to do it with candor, not brutal honesty. But we've got to be courageous too. We've got to speak what's on our mind. And we've got to feel the ability to be clear, not just with them, but with ourselves, right? And then the other one is this is a huge one. Part of braving is the vault. And the vault is basically where, it's keeping other people's confidences. Inevitably, when I do, the braving thing and I have them rank their team, vault is always the lowest. It's 1s across the board. Okay. And I don't know this for sure. I don't have data on this, but if you connect the dots, they're really lonely. And when Brene's talking about the vault, she talks about how we hotwire connection with gossip. And I think that they're really lonely, and it feels good in the moment. Like, oh, we're going to hate the same person. Come here. You don't have something nice to say. Come sit next to me. It feels really good in the moment. I know a lot of teams, like literally that's how they start every practice. The problem is you're losing trust with each other, because you know that if you're not in the room, your team's going to be talking about you too. And so they're doing it out of a desperation to connect, but it actually ends up making them feel more isolated. And so I talk to this about, and it's not going to be perfect right away. What we talk about on this team, we talk to each other, not about each other. I think that's a really, really important one. And so all of these are tools that you can help your athletes, give your athletes to help you create a safer space that everybody can show up and truly belong. And I also talk about this, and again, I'm totally connecting this from some of Brené's work, but fitting in is not the same as belonging. And that's tricky with teams because they have to, it's not your job to, figure out how each individual person wants to wear their socks and, conform to that person. There is some conformity. There's some fitting in that has to happen with teams so we can norm and, be unified. But in terms of your person, in terms of your heart, in terms of showing up and being who you are, we've got to allow and encourage and understand the difference between fitting in and belonging. Fitting in gets in the way of belonging because if I'm not saying what I think is true, or if I'm hiding certain parts of myself, then I can't truly belong because you don't really know me. And so I think it's super important to understand the difference between those two. And if you're coaching, you probably were in high school, not, at some point in your life, and the urge and the pull to fit in. But on your team, I think that the desire for true belonging could not be overstated as an important element to being able to coach this generation of student athletes, especially females. So I just wanted to give you all that, and I feel bad that I didn't get to all of that on the call, and there was a little bit more that I still kind of left out, but I thought I would just record this real quick, and hopefully I get it to them in time to get into the mailer. If anybody wants to reach out, gosh, I'm here, and I really love to help coaches. So thanks a lot. Happy coaching.